Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I think we're recording correctly here. Welcome to this week's episode of Food Systems in Season. My name is Bill Lester. I'm with University of Florida Extension Service in Hernando County, and I'm here with my co-worker, Wendy Lynch, who's going to help me coordinate and organize all the cameras and all the speakers and all the information here today. So good afternoon, Wendy. How are you?
I am great. So again, I'm Wendy Lynch. I'm with IFAS Extension in St. Johns County. And today we have with us two experts from Lake County. First, as you can see outside, that's Brandon White. He is the Commercial Crop Production and Food Systems Extension Agent in Lake and Orange County. And then in the kitchen, we've got Lori Johnson from IFAS Extension Lake County also, and she's the Family and Consumer Sciences Agent. And today we are talking all things sorrel, and we're going to kick it off, pass over the camera to Brandon. So Brandon, take it away.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay?
I hear you.
Okay, cool. I can't see the camera. So awesome. So as Wendy said, my name is Brandon White. I am the extension agent for Lake and Orange counties for commercial crop production and food systems. So I cover pretty much everything edible, maybe a couple other things as well. So today I'm actually at my home garden. So welcome to Orange County. I'm actually in Ocoee. So this is my my stand of sorrel. I think you can mostly see everything. This looks really beautiful. Let's see, when was the storm? About 3 weeks ago, pre-storm. As you can imagine, the storm or the plant took quite a beating with the storm, even though we weren't in a direct impact, and the wind was coming quite this way and kind of lodged everything over. So as we'll talk about in the end, this crop gets really big. It gets like 7, maybe even like 8 feet tall, and it fruits a lot and tends to kind of lodge on its own. So a large hurricane didn't help that. So there should be some pictures in the chat if you want to see the plant in its full glory, what it looked like about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So today, this is sorrel. Sorrel is, it's a beautiful plant. I had actually never heard of the crop until about a year and a half or so ago. It's really neat. I've learned a lot about it. The entire plant is edible. It's got a lot of uses. It's native to West Africa. It's been grown in Mexico. It's grown in tropical, subtropical areas. It's kind of a newer thing to the States that's becoming more popular. I'm part of a research team with other extension agents looking at different varieties that are could be alternative crops and varieties for our climate here in Central Florida. So these are some extra plants from that I planted in the garden, and they've done really well. So there's a lot of common names, like a lot of plants. This is actually Hibiscus sabdorifa is the scientific name. It's kind of a fun one to say. Sorrel is the common name that we use. You'll hear Roselle. That's perhaps a more common name. You'll also hear it called Florida cranberry. It can be sort of a substitute for cranberry because cranberries don't really grow in Florida, Central Florida. Jamaican sorrel is another one you'll hear. There's another common plant called sorrel that is more an herb or grown as a leafy green. So if you Google sorrel recipes, you're going to usually find that sorrel first. That can be French sorrel or common sorrel. This plant, you actually have a better luck finding recipes if you Google Roselle recipes or use the scientific name. Again, not related to that sorrel. This plant is actually more closely related to okra, cotton, and ornamental hibiscus. You can see if my camera woman is able to zoom in on this flower here, you can see the leaf. That one's kind of small. It's kind of past flowering. This is kind of a late bloomer. And you can see that the flower looks quite a bit like an ornamental hibiscus. So I know some folks that actually grow this in their yard just as an ornamental. It can make a hedge. It fills in. It's very dense. But it's primarily grown for an edible crop. So growing conditions, we're going to talk about growing conditions, kind of some agronomic stuff, and then we'll get into pests and diseases, the uses, and then how to harvest and store it. And then of course, Lori is going to talk about how you cook it, because that's what we care about, right? So as you can see, it gets really big. These plants, the spacing that we figured out for our trials here is about 4 feet. And even still, it's kind of like growing and trying to trample over itself. It'll get just about, like I said, like 7-8 feet. I've never looked, and I'm not sure, we haven't pruned any back. I suspect that could, if you did it early enough without cutting off your buds, that might help keep the plant smaller, where it would lodge less once it fruits and gets so heavy. It likes full sun. It grows really well in Florida soils because we have sandy soils that don't hold too much water. We have lost actual trial sites because they got too much water and flooded. It does not tolerate flooded soils very well. And when we get to the pests and diseases, it's a little section, we'll talk about that, but it's kind of prone to getting root rot diseases. So that's something to look out for. It's unique, kind of like its relative okra. Okra is one of the few things you can grow in Florida, Central Florida, in the middle of the summer, and it actually thrives. So this plant, being somewhat related, actually grows just fine throughout the summer. Does not need a lot of water. It's a very low input plant. I've got irrigation drip emitters, and they come on for 15 minutes 2 or 3 times a day. That's not even dialed in for this crop. That's just what I had it already set at. So for me, and I think for a lot of uses for this plant, it's one of the reasons that I like it so much. It's a great thing for homeowners to grow because it's one of those plants you can kind of just put out there and kind of forget about it, and it can still produce and do really well. So you plant the plant, and so far in this area, we've realized you plant it in late spring, early summer, and then it'll grow through the summer, and you'll start seeing flowering around August and start harvesting in September through October and kind of into middle of November. So kind of where we're at now. Let's see. So I have drip irrigation here in my garden. That's kind of one of the preferred ways to grow a lot of fruits and vegetables, vegetables specifically. It's done fine with overhead irrigation. We haven't seen any kind of leaf spots or like powdery mildew, things that some diseases that can be encouraged by overhead irrigation, but the plant seems pretty hardy. So from a kind of agronomic perspective, so kind of still growing conditions, for those who know what photoperiodism is, that is a plant's requirement of the amount of daylight or nighttime hours that it needs in order to produce. So sorrel is a photoperiod sensitive crops. A lot of the varieties, there are some varieties that are what we call day neutral. And so those ones, they have been bred or just found naturally selected where they will fruit or flower and fruit regardless of the amount of light. So this is a common phenomenon. So some crops that are long day plants are things like lettuce and spinach. Some short day crops would be poinsettias. And soybeans is another example of a short day crop. So we've seen more commonly for other varieties that aren't day neutral, they tend to display more characteristics of short day crops. So they're gonna, once we get into the fall we get more nighttime hours and less daylight, the plants will start to flower. But we've got at least 2 varieties that we've observed that one is for sure day neutral and the other one seems to be mostly day neutral. So shouldn't be an issue for this area. So then theoretically you could plant a day neutral variety kind of anytime during the year and expect it for it to fruit because it's not requiring a certain amount of day length. It will most likely, not quite sure about the data for this because it hasn't applied to us. I don't imagine they would tolerate frost or freezing temperatures very well. So that's something to think about if you are going to plant a day neutral variety, later in the year. The seeds are true to type. So that means that if you want to harvest the seeds to keep them going for next season, you can harvest those and plant them and they will grow back a sorrel plant just like the previous one. Not all plants are like that. Grapes are an example of a plant that aren't true to type. So you could save the seeds and plant them and you would get a different variety of grapes that you may not want. It's grown as an annual here in Florida. It could be grown in an extended season, maybe in a more tropical climate. But for here, it is grown as an annual. So pretty soon here, I'm going to harvest this. I don't know what I will do with all this sorrel. My kids do love it, but I've got a bunch of it, as you can see. And I have found just my personal experience here in the garden, I have gotten a 5-gallon bucket, so 5 gallons of mature sorrel calyxes per plant, and that's just at one harvest. But the beauty of this plant is you can get multiple harvests out of it, so it is a heavy producer. So let's talk about pests and diseases. So in this garden, I planted this. The plants were maybe this tall when I started, or when I put them in. I fertilized them maybe a week later with an organic kind of complete fertilizer. That was all I did. I have not done anything else with them. I water them every single day, but I did not treat them with anything. I didn't even come and monitor for pests, and they've done very well. So again, it's very low inputs, and they probably would have done just fine without all of that water. But again, I just kind of had mine on. So yeah, I put them in, kind of forgot about them, and they've done awesome. And as far as I know, the other trials that we've done with commercial farms across Lake County, we've got one in Sumter, they have not had to treat either, and they've also done really well on their harvest. So we have seen some issues with nematodes, mostly root rot nematodes. We've had that at least one site. Hasn't been an issue here. Hasn't been an issue at someone else in the project that grows a lot of this. I don't believe that's been an issue for her at her garden. But that is something just to be aware of that we're looking at. Mealybugs, aphids, lubbers, caterpillars. These are all things we've observed. Again, we haven't had to treat them. The plant grows so vigorously that you don't really, they're present in here. Like I could look hard. We're not going to zoom in to show you an aphid, but we could. They're here, they're present, but they're not causing any damage. So even if I were selling these, the calyces still look beautiful. The leaves are still very edible. So it's not at like an economic threshold or a threshold where it's gonna, if you're a farmer, it wouldn't be a concern for not being able to sell your crop. And if you're just a homeowner and you want to have a nice salad, it's not gonna look gross, right? So I have not had to treat. Let's see, diseases. So I mentioned doesn't like wet feet. So all the diseases that we've seen have been soil-borne pathogens that they just naturally exist in the soil. But when it gets too wet, it can just create an environment where they will thrive, and that'll cause the plant to get a disease. So again, we lost a whole trial site because of these kind of issues. So can't take too much water. So use and value. It's got a lot. So the leaves are edible. My daughter will actually take these and like roll the leaf up and put a big like bundle in her mouth, which is kind of funny. The leaves can be used as salad, so as like a kind of spinach replacement. These, you can show this. So these younger tender leaves are the ones you want to go for. They've got a really unique flavor. They're pretty strong, pretty tart. You can also see how pretty they are when you get close. They've got this red veining in there that's really attractive. But you can eat the leaves. You can also saute them and do like wilted greens. You can use the bigger leaves for that because they are tougher as they get older and more mature. But if you're going to saute them, that won't matter as much. But for salads, you can take these, and it's really cool because again, this plant is growing. You're going to have a lot of vegetative growth in the summer, and it's hard to find leafy greens, especially that are nutritious and healthy during the summer. So it's a really cool thing to come out here and pluck some leaves and mix them with some salad or some spinach and make a salad. And Lori is going to show you that. We've got a salad dressing we've made from the fruit, and so cool stuff. So, but the star of the show is the calyx or the calyx. You can pronounce that both ways. That is, if we can zoom in here, that is this pretty thing. So the plant is really a pretty funky looking thing. I think it looks very Halloween-esque. But this is not actually a fruit or a flower. I showed you the flower before. So that thing will flower. And actually, if we're able to zoom in on this, this will help us see. You can see this is the calyx, and that structure is not typically a structure that we would be a commodity that we would eat. It's usually just there. It's part of the flower structure in total that kind of supports the petals. And typically that part is green and looks very much like a leaf. And, it would just be kind of in the background and on a normal plant. This, however, this flower is going to do its thing and fall off, and this calyx is going to get bigger, and it's going to get really fleshy, and then it's going to turn into one of these guys here. So this is, again, it's called a calyx. So it's kind of easier. You can call them fruit just because it's a trickier word to say. I kind of just refer to them as a fruit, even though they're not. But this is what Connect growers, that's what they're really growing it for. The edible leaves is just kind of like an extra benefit. But there's more uses for the calyxes. You can use them for all sorts of things, and Lori's going to talk about that. They're very, very tart. They've got a really strong taste. I'll show you how to harvest them in a couple minutes here. But as you can see, just on this one stem alone, this is very typical. I've got like several here that I could harvest. So I wouldn't harvest these smaller ones, or you can see here. But what happens is that when you harvest, so if I go and I cut this, I cut that there, that's got new, the formation of new flowers in the axillary in these buds. So you can come out and harvest one week, and then the next week, these smaller ones are going to have more energy to produce, get bigger. You can harvest those, and then you're going to get this new growth. So you could really get anywhere from 5 to 8 harvests out of the crop. So that's what you're growing it for. You do have to use some clippers to harvest them. So if you're a grower, that's not the most ideal situation, because that's going to mean more labor for the homeowner. That's we're kind of used to doing that. That shouldn't be a big deal. But just have a lot of recipes ready, and maybe have some help. Small children are great for helping in the garden. That's why I have 3. So the growers can get more for these. I've seen them sell for $5, I think $6 a pint, and growers can sell them with the seed pod inside, or you can punch the seed pod out and just sell like the fleshy part. Let's see. There's some reported value in literature of being able to use the fiber. The plants lodge over, but the fiber, so the stem is actually quite strong. So similar to like hemp. Hemp is grown, industrial hemp, or for cannabis or medicinal purposes, or recreational, depending on where you live. That fiber has a lot of uses. So not quite the same for this plant, but I've seen some reported uses there. And then again, it can be used as an ornamental. So harvest, I talked about the plants will start to flower in August. You'll get good production of the calyxes through September and October, and then November is when it's going to start to piddle out a little bit. The seeds, let me go ahead and actually show you the de-seeding process. This is kind of the fun part. So I showed you how you can clip these. And what happens is that you can take this, and you actually have to be a little bit careful. You're not going to be able to see these, but they've got these tiny little hairs on the base here of the calyx. And then what happens is when you peel these, it's kind of like a petal, a flower petal. You peel this and it tends to break down here, and you got these aren't spiky, they don't hurt, they look kind of gnarly. But if I take this, the more you handle this, these little tiny hairs can actually get in your skin and just kind of be uncomfortable. And then you kind of break it apart. So if you wanted to use this whole thing as a garnish, it kind of destroys it. Takes a long time. It does kind of stain your hands a little bit. So that's how you would eat it. If you didn't have a cool tool, and then you lose this part, and you can just kind of see what happens. So I think it was my colleagues actually that came up with this, if I'm not mistaken. But what we do is we take this, and we've got this cool little tool here that I think is a modified umbrella handle, if I'm not mistaken. So it's simply a little handle with some hollow metal. Take this here, and you can put it right over here on the stem. Y'all can see that. And you just generously kind of push that thing through. It's super cool. So you get your seed stuck there. You can just flick that off. And then you can actually come and make like a little skewer. So I can take one of these. Let's see here. So when we're doing a whole bunch of this, we're kind of cruising through and just doing that. And you can get this full skewer, and then you can take your bucket or whatever and just push those off. Super easy, super quick. So that's pretty fun. So then that also helps you. It can kind of punch a little bit here. This is the seed pod. You can take these on the plant. You'll see when the calyx starts to open, what look like the flower petals, it'll open a lot more. And then you can see that this thing will start to crack when it starts to dry out. It doesn't have to be cracked to harvest it. You can also take this this seed pod and do like a one layer, don't stack them, but you can set them out somewhere to just air dry. And once these start drying out, this will crack open and there's a whole bunch of seeds in here. So that's a way that you can save the seeds. So it's really easy to do. You can also dry the calyxes. They dry really well. They actually maintain their color when they dry, which is really neat. I like to freeze them. They freeze well. They get a little bit softer. They're pretty crisp when they're fresh like this. So if you want to put on a salad, that's kind of the way to go. But you can put them in the freezer and they'll do well that way. I just rinse mine off, put them in a Ziploc bag and chuck them in there. Some folks will let it dry and grind it, and then they'll save it as a dry powder. So that's like if you want to make a tea out of it, you'll see a lot of recipes call for the dry powder. You can actually buy, they call it hibiscus tea, I believe. You can buy it at Publix or big grocery stores. And it's in the dry powder form. So very versatile, very easy thing to work with. You don't have to have like special equipment except for your umbrella handle. Let's see. So a couple other notes just to kind of think about. I don't know, Meg, if we're able to get, well, I'll just show you if we can see this stem. Yeah, let's do it that way. We'll go over the side. Getting on in here. So you can see how big this trunk is. I didn't even fully think about this, even though I kind of knew better when I put these in here. They get a really big root system. It's part of the reason this plant is able to do so well. The root system is pretty extensive. So that was one of the things we heard from our growers. They had the plastic weed cloth down in their garden as well. And it can kind of destroy it. It can be a lot of work to dig them up. I actually cut mine off with a chainsaw, and I'm probably just going to leave them in there and let them rot in place. So something to think about. You need space. You need to be able to just think about getting them out pretty easy. I think I might have mentioned this, but in case I didn't, the plants are going to lodge. This is largely the result of the hurricane. However, it's worse because of the hurricane, but this is kind of a typical situation here. So for us, when we go to for our trials to harvest things, the most tedious part about it is not actually de-seeding. The most tedious part is making sure that the plants, we're making sure we're only getting the calyces, the fruit from the plant that we need so we get correct data, because the plants are kind of all over the place. So maybe if you did them in like 6 foot spacing, you wouldn't have that issue. But you can see here as well, these are, this was the kind of late bloomer one. So this is the variety that in our trials didn't really flower for us until like late November. But this one is starting to punch through it. I believe this variety is called Black. As you can see, the calyx here is a lot darker. So it's really pretty. These will get bigger as it goes. And again, once you start taking some off, these smaller ones are going to pop out. You can see right there. Perhaps that's one where you've got to, it's a great example. So once this guy gets bigger, you'll cut that one off. And then this one is going to get big and you'll be able to harvest that one a week or so afterwards. I think that's everything I'd plan to talk about, but I have much more I could say if we have any questions. I don't know if you all have had any questions in the chat or if anybody wants to be brave and audio in.
I got a question for you, Brandon. So like the 2 different varieties that you just shared, do they have, I don't know if you've tasted that darker variety. Does it have a different flavor?
I would give a disclaimer that I probably don't have the most refined palate. I drink cheap wine. But I haven't tasted a difference because I'm pretty sure I do. I have had some of these plants that have this variety that has produced, and I don't think I could really tell the difference, but others might be able to. That's an excellent question. Certainly if you're thinking about like how you're going to cook it, And then even to one of the folks that we're working with for the project that we're on is they make wine. So they're actually kind of doing some experimenting, looking at making wine with crop, which is really interesting. So that could be kind of a different flavor profile, maybe with a darker variety. And I think Lori's going to touch on this too. And I'm not going to get into specifics because there's not a whole lot of research, but I was able to find research, kind of short publication that showed that it's got a lot of nutritive value. Some of the things were even higher than blueberries. So just a really, really cool crop, like all around.
Anything that we missed, Bill? Oh, I see one now that just came in. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, RK asks, can you give the full name of the plant and the varieties that you covered, please?
Yeah, so the plant, and this is on the sheet too, if you don't want to have to, spelling out loud is hard, right? So
Exactly.
it's Hibiscus sabdariffa is the scientific name. Again, that's Hibiscus sabdariffa. The common name is sorrel, which is Sorrelle, I believe, or no E on the end. It's on the sheet. I told you I was bad at spelling. So the other question was, so this variety, we just called it day neutral. I don't actually have, we had festival black, day neutral, and one that we were just called local because it was one that some of our farmers were already growing. I don't even know that we were able to uncover what the actual name for that was. There hasn't been, because this is kind of a newer crop, and it's not the most traditional one like corn or soybeans or citrus or something. There's not as many programs that have breeding programs, so it's not as formalized for variety names and things like that. So the team that we're working with, there is a breeder breeding. Part of our project is breeding varieties that will do better in Florida. But I'm not even sure that in terms of finding seeds and varieties, how far along the market is for being able to find those named varieties. But if you're able to find some, I would say that finding ones that are labeled as day neutral would be the way to go. That way, again, you don't have to worry about the timing of when you plant them as much.
Okay, that kind of ties in with Mark's question. What is the propagation time from seed, and are seedlings available at nurseries?
Yeah, great question. So I meant to touch on the timing. So the plant, it's typically done where you'll take the seeds. They kind of need to be dried first. So again, you'll wait for that seed pod to crack, dry the seeds out. You're going to store them in a cool, dry place. The fridge is a great spot, like you do with other seeds. And then once they've been dried, then you can plant them. They germinate pretty quick, and then you can transplant them. You would kind of use the general rule of thumb like you would for other like vegetable starts, but our transplants are like this big, but you could transplant them. Again, they grow pretty vigorous, so they can be kind of small when you plant them. I've not done it, but I would imagine that they would propagate vegetatively for cuttings very well. If Norma happens to be on the call and can confirm that, she would probably know that. So Norma, you're welcome to chime in there if you're here. But I would think they would propagate real easy. You can. I checked with the expert because I was wondering that myself at some point. They have been able to take. They seem to kind of need that period for germination to be dried, that kind of period of dormancy. But they have been able to take fresh seeds, again, from a mature, like bigger calyx, take those seeds and soak them in water overnight and then plant them. And they've been able to get them to germinate that way. So you could kind of play around with that. And I think you probably do pretty well. But again, if we're able to zoom in maybe one more time, you are going to want to take seeds, not from one that's about this big. And it's kind of a size thing. These ones I would harvest. You can see this one, this one, this one, and this one. This one's questionable. You could harvest this one. You could let it get a little bigger, but I would probably avoid taking seeds from this one. I would take the seeds from the bigger ones, and you can see as it gets bigger, this part tends to open up more. If you're able to see in there, if that makes sense. And then you can kind of, for comparison, you can see this one over here is kind of closed, so it's a little smaller. So you're going to want to wait for it to get a little more size and these to open up a little more before you would want to take them. They're going to taste the same. So if you're not worried about saving seeds, and you're going to have a million of them, so some of them you're not going to want to take all the seeds. So like you could eat this one and it'll taste very similar and fine, but I wouldn't take the seeds from that guy.
Okay, one more quick question before we go on to Lori and Lori's food cam.
Yeah.
Ralph asked, should you keep growing them year to year in the same spot, or do bugs eat them up?
Well, because they're grown as an annual, again, from our standpoint, in the Virgin Islands, where part of our team is doing, that's where the breeder is. I believe they are able to grow them as a biennial or perennial crop. For here, we're growing them as an annual. So our farms have kind of taken them out like after harvest. It's always good practice to not that's my friendly neighbor, to not let a crop sit there. And after you've harvested, it's a good thing to get it out of there because you don't want this to be a breeding ground for other pest diseases. So I'd recommend getting it out. And then always good, that's a great question. Crop rotating is always a good practice. What else can I say about that? Yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned. And I will say I was at I was at a site that had a bunch of sorrel, I think just yesterday actually, and they actually did have quite a bit of pest pressure. They're at a farm though that has other crops, and so they've got more of a kind of a breeding ground, we'll say, for other insects and stuff. So for here and the everyday backyard garden, I don't think that's going to be as much of an issue. But if you were in a a larger scale, then rotating crops and management's going to be a little more important for you.
Okay, that's great. Let's go ahead and move on to Lori, and Lori's going to show us some of the different things that you could do with it. So Lori and Wendy.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. And so from our field with Brandon to now going to the table, we are going to cook 4 different things. After today's session, you guys will receive this awesome handout and an additional one that Brandon put together. And it is going to have all of the recipes that I'm going to make today. So first, we're going to start, and I'll give you some nutrition throughout. So sorrel has lots of calcium, which is great for our bones and helps our muscles contract and for our nervous system. So this morning, as you can see under my little food cam, Brandon harvested these beautiful ones because I did use some that we had frozen, but those are the freshly harvested sorrel. So we're going to get started with the tea. So this morning I already made the concentrate, and I'm doing half a recipe of the tea. So I took 12 cups of these calyxes and added 2 cups of water. I put it in our stock pot, and once it came to a boil, I cooked it for about 10 minutes, and then I used a wire strainer just like this over a bowl or another pot. And then I strained out those solids, and then I have our concentrate, which looks like, if I can get it under the camera correctly, looks like that. So I'm going to put everything in, and then we're going to put it on the stove. So first I'm going to take our 1 cup of concentrate, because as I mentioned, I'm doing half a recipe. And then I'm going to mix it with some water. And then I've already peeled some fresh ginger. There you go. And chopped it up really small. So I'm going to throw that in. And then I also have a small cinnamon stick. And I have some cloves, ground cloves, fresh or whole cloves, should I say. And then we're just going to put a little bit of lemon zest. So make sure when you zest, you wash your fruits and veggies first. So just rubbing back and forth with the zester will give a nice flavor to anything you're cooking. So don't waste that rind at all. And so I'm just going to put some of that in. And then I'm going to add some orange zest. As our sorrel is the star of the show, we want to still have some complementing flavors with our orange and our lemon. All right, so I'm just going to put those over there. We're going to give this a quick stir. As you can see, it's very red. So I'm just going to take it to the stove real quick, just turn it on. And basically what we're doing is once it comes to a boil, we're going to boil it for about 10 minutes. All right, so just give me 1 second.
So this is the part when we wish we all had smell-o-vision.
Yes, because it smells great. I'll be ready for lunch after this. Another nutrition fact is it has magnesium. Sorrel has magnesium, which helps with blood pressure and blood sugar regulation. Another benefit for our health. So the next thing I'm going to do is make our salad. So as Brandon mentioned, you can also eat the leaves. And so this morning as well, he harvested these beautiful sorrel leaves for me. And we have them already washed. And then I also have just some spinach leaves that I had. So I'm going to mix the two together, but you can certainly just do with the sorrel leaves. As you can see from Brandon's crop, he's got a lot to choose from. So you can just keep it simple. They are a little sweet. They're not as bitter as the actual, I know it's not a fruit, but I'm going to call it fruit for today's purposes. They're not as bitter as these. They're a little bit sweet. So I'm just going to add those in. And then you can either chop it ahead of time. You can use sanitized kitchen shears, or you can just use your hands, just like I'm doing. I did wash my hands ahead of time. Always make sure to practice good food safety by always washing your hands before you get cooking, and then throughout, and then afterwards as well. So I'm just going to break those up into those smaller pieces because they are pretty big leaves, even though they're tender and mature. Get our leafy greens in. Leafy greens are great for vitamin K. They have vitamin C. Vitamin C gives a good boost to our immunity. So as we enter cold and flu season, always make sure you're getting those greens in there. All right, and then you can top your salad with anything. Today I have some tomatoes that I'm gonna put in. Always make sure you have lots of color with your veggies, 2 to 3 colors of fruits and veggies each day for great benefits to your nutrition. I have some pecans that I've chopped up, so I'm going to add that. Also crunch different textures on your plate, makes it more interesting. And then I'm going to put some soft cheese in there as well, just a little bit. And then I did chop up some sorrel already. So as Brandon mentioned, you can freeze it, and this was frozen. And so it's a little bit softer on my hands versus the ones he just harvested this morning, which I don't know if you can hear that, but it's a little bit of a crunch. So depending on the texture you want, if you want or have the fresh and you want a little crunch, just take these and chop them up to your preferred size, add them on top. I'm going to add these on top as well. So if you have them frozen, which is a great food preservation method to decrease food waste and use your harvest, you can just use the frozen and it works just fine. Rinse off my hands. All right. So then we have our beautiful salad. I know you all want to come over for lunch. And then let me just rearrange a couple of things. We're going to make our salad dressing next. And I'm just going to take a quick peek at the stove while I move things around to make sure that our tea is on track.
So I don't know about you guys, but I think I'm on my way to Lori's for lunch.
Come on down.
All the beautiful colors, the textures. Looks like a good meal.
Yeah. All right. And making your own homemade salad dressing is super easy and quick. And really, you only need 3 different components. You need a fat, an acid, and a seasoning. And so you can make your own at home with the ingredients you have, and it's healthier for you because you're controlling what's in it. You can make it fresh and then store it in an airtight container, like a mason jar, and then just make sure you use it within a couple of days. So this morning I'm going to make, or this afternoon, I guess we're in, I already have some sorrel in my food processor here, and we're just going to chop that up. And we're going to also add in a 1/4 cup of water because I want to make it a little bit of a puree. So I'm just gonna stick that on. It's gonna get noisy for a minute, so bear with me. All right. Oh, need a little bit more. And any kind of food processor will do. You can even use a blender. It's really up to you. You do want to make sure if you do spill, which I always do, you clean up because it can stain. I don't want to stain my countertops. And if you use the frozen, just like I'm using right now, the frozen sorrel, it will be a little more watery. So if you want a thicker dressing or a thicker kind of liquid, you might want to use the fresh or just use a little less water. All right, so to our jar, we are going to take all these. Let me make sure we're still lined up. Awesome. All right, so to our jar, we're going to just add the sorrel. We just blended up. If you have an immersion blender, you can also use that. Just make sure that you have a really tall container so that you're not spraying everything everywhere. But whatever kind of blender you have or food processor, go for it. If it's not big enough, you can always do it in small batches. So just trying to get in all our sorrel. Right. Another nutrition tip on sorrel is if it's full of phosphorus, which helps our bones and our energy production. That's another great benefit. All right, so we have that in there. And then to that, make sure you can see. Yes. All right, I'm going to add some lemon juice. I'm going to add some minced garlic. I'm going to add some honey. Always a great idea to use local honey. We have lots of folks in different areas, and make sure to check out your local farmers to support local. And then we have some olive oil. Get these out of our way. If anybody wants to come do my dishes today, I'll feed you lunch. And I'm going to add that what I just added there was balsamic vinegar. And then the last thing that I'm going to add is just a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. And that's it. And then just put your lid on. Make sure you put it on really tight. And you just shake. And then you're going to make, in just a matter of minutes, your own sorrel dressing. I'll take the lid off once I have it all mixed together. And then I'm going to check on our tea. All right. So just bring that up to the camera. There you go. So we have our own sorrel dressing. It's like the consistency of a vinaigrette. All right. So I'm going to put that lid on so it doesn't spill all that deliciousness. Just give me 1 second. All right. I know you can't see my stove, but our tea is boiling. So I am going to set a timer for 10 minutes. Perfect. All right. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a sorrel relish. So I'm going to get my next ninja up. So I have another food processor. So this has our, and I'll show you the difference. This is the sorrel that was frozen. As you can see, it's very squishy, whereas this is the sorrel from the garden today, and it's much firmer. All right. So we have our sorrel that we're going to chop up for our relish. So let me just swap these out. All right, just give me a minute to chop up our sorrel. Great, be pretty good. All right, so I'm just gonna put this one to the side and I'm gonna use a different one just because mine has a different container, and we're gonna chop up the other ingredients together. So let me just pull those over. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna use is some oranges and with the rind on it, so make sure that you wash it really well. This is gonna be a great source of fiber. Fruits and veggies have a lot of fiber, but especially when you eat the edible skin. So we're gonna incorporate that, but make sure that you rinse that skin off. So it's a half of an orange. I'm gonna add that in. I'm also gonna add some pecans. You can also add whatever other nuts you want. It's a great source of protein. I'm gonna add some water. And then I'm gonna add some honey. Another great sorrel nutrition fact is it's great in potassium, which helps our fluids stay balanced and also our heart to function. So a lot of great benefits. All right, I'm gonna mix this up real quick. Just kind of a chopped amount. All right, and then I'm going to add it to our sorrel to combine it to make the relish. Right, all these beautiful colors and textures. Got those. All right, get this out of your way. All right, put that on, and it doesn't take much because we've already chopped both of them, but we want to make sure that we're combining those. And I'm also going to kind of just take a spatula in there and mix it around just to make sure it's mixed together. You can mix it all at one time, but I just found that it chopped up the sorrel a little too much because it was at the bottom. So that's why I chose to do it in different batches, in different containers, but it's totally up to you what you want to do. I think it just needs a little bit more and then it'll be good to go. Grab another paper towel. I am not a neat cook, so but I make delicious food. Always good to have extra paper towels around. Right. All right. I think
Lori, I was thinking it was quite the opposite. You are just keeping it all clean and flowing in the kitchen. So
I'm glad it looks that way. All right. So I have a bowl here so you guys can see inside, and I'll hold it up so that way you can see what this relish looks like. So this relish can pair with any type of protein you want, whatever protein of your choice. We also have the holidays coming up. This is a great, as Brandon said, one of the names could be Florida cranberry. So you might want to swap out your cranberries this year and have a little bit of sorrel instead, and your guests might not even know the difference. Just to mix it up in your plate a little bit. And as you can see, that's our beautiful sorrel relish. If I can spell it. All right. And then I'm going to get ready for our tea. Has just a couple minutes. While our tea is cooking, is there any, the other thing I had mentioned was vitamin C. So Brandon said about the nutrition in blueberries and comparing it to sorrel. So sorrel is a great source of vitamin C, which is great for our immune system. It also helps heal cuts and wounds. So sorrel has a lot of great value. and benefits to our bodies, as do a variety of foods, but it's really important to try new things. I had never had sorrel till we started doing this project, and now it's something that I definitely want to keep on the menu. There's a lot of great uses today. I'm just showing you a few of them, but you can really be creative in the kitchen and find uses and take the benefits, the health benefits of this delicious crop. We have a few minutes until our tea is ready. Is there any questions on the culinary side?
I'm not seeing any on the culinary side.
Or for Brandon.
Yeah, Brandon. So I don't know if you can turn your video back on. We do have a couple questions for you. One being, what is the difference between sorrel and Jamaican sorrel? If you are able to join us, let's see. There you are.
Yes, sorry. Can you see me okay?
Yeah, great.
So it's the same thing. Jamaican sorrel is just one of the other common names for this regular sorrel or roselle. So the same thing.
Okay. And then there was one other. What type of wildlife does sorrel attract?
Yes. So Meg and I were just sitting here watching a squirrel come in and try to take some sorrel. And on the gate of my garden, you can see where they're taking them, and they're going up on the post of the gate, and you can see all this like remnants of what used to be some sorrel. I've got my big, I didn't talk about, was a short-haired pointer named Finn, who has since been rehomed, but I put the fence up so he would not dig up my garden and run through. It also, when you do a loose fence like that, it can keep out, it's loose on purpose to keep like larger varmints from being able to climb on it real easy. Stuff can kind of sneak underneath, but I have not had a wildlife problem, but I've got a pretty big lot, but it's pretty urban around me. So while we've had things like raccoons and then we've had one bear, we wouldn't have deer at our property. So I could see that might be an issue. I've not had any other issues with birds. I don't know that folks have. I'm trying to think of our other farms, and they haven't reported any wildlife nuisance stuff to us. So
awesome, thank you. So it sounds like the squirrels are the main culprit for us.
The squirrels, yes. For me, the squirrels have been the biggest pest issue, other than insect pests.
And even still, there's so much still out there. So, and I can see Lori's got our tea pouring. It looks like we're almost ready there. So thank you, Brandon.
Sure. I don't know if Lori mentioned, if I may, the tea she's making today is going to be on ice, and it's really good. It's refreshing, but it's actually, I think, more commonly done as a warm tea. Did you already talk about this, Lori?
No, go for it.
Yeah. So in the islands, this is like, they call it sorrel drink. And it's traditionally done around the holidays. So they make, it's similar recipe that she's making today. There's 100 million recipes of different sorrel drink that you can tweak to your liking, but they'll make it warm and sometimes even add some extra things to make it an adult beverage, but that's a pretty common thing. So it's cool. It could be warm or cold.
Yep, and I just poured our 10 minutes was up, and I just want to show you before I put it to the side. This was not very much that I had poured out. Just using my fine mesh strainer again, just to keep our tea that we're going to pour. I am going to pour it over ice, but it is really hot, so it will probably melt my ice. But I do want to show you guys, as Brandon said, you can serve it hot or cold. And we're going to use this side. And makes a delicious drink. And then you can also garnish it with some fresh mint if you like. So you might be able to see that in my food cam. There you go. And that's some culinary uses for sorrel.
It looks great. So we're all headed over. We'll see you soon.
Come on down.
Oh, gracious. So any other questions, you guys? So go ahead and drop those in the chat. Lots of good uses for sorrel, both outside and inside.
Any other questions?
I think you guys answered them all.
I think so.
Hey,
So guys, we thank you so much for joining us today, joining Lori and Brandon in Lake County. And we are excited that next week we will have 2 more experts on teaching you what to do with 5 acres or 5 square feet. And if you have other questions for Lori and Brandon, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd be happy to pass those questions on to them. And don't forget those handouts. You can get those once you've completed the survey. We will, you'll have access to those handouts they mentioned in today's talk. So thank you so much for being with us today for Food Systems in Season Fall Edition, Session 3. And we hope to see you next episode.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
thanks for having us on.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.